Hey everybody, I just got back from vacation and I'm making a video. You're watching Value Vinyl with Mark. That's right. The wife and I just got back from a week's vacation down at the Jersey Shore. We spent the week in Long Beach Island. We had a beautiful house on the beach in Holgate. We were mere steps away from the ocean. But of course, when you're at the beach for a week, even though you're in a nice, peaceful atmosphere, who doesn't want to go looking for an antique shop or a thrift store or a vinyl record shop? Well, that may be most people, but it's not me. And we actually ended up going to an antique shop about half an hour away in Tuckerton. We're going to start off with the Grateful Dead and Europe 1972. Now, it's very rare that you'll find a Grateful Dead album out in the wild, especially at an antique store. And if you do, it's usually priced at $50, $60 or more. You just don't know. This specific album is a 3 LP album, live obviously, during their tour in 72. And all 3 records are in, I'd say, near mint condition. As you can see, the cover itself has some pretty bad water damage on the top. And all 3 original inserts and the booklet that comes with it also have a little water damage on the top. But it doesn't affect the play of the record, so that's all that really matters to me. But the Grateful Dead is a band that I am not going to sit here and tell you I am the biggest fan of. They're obviously a great jam band. They have a huge following. They just did, I think, one of their farewell tours with John Mayer this past year, or they're currently doing it, I think. But just a band that you can put on in the background and just mellow out. A great band. Musically, they're just phenomenal. And again, I'm not their biggest fan. I couldn't probably name more than 5 or 6 of their songs. But with that said, I think everybody should own at least one Grateful Dead album. This is actually my second to add to Touch of Grey. But Europe 72 at the Tuckerton Antique Store. I'm going to give you the price that I spent for all of these albums at the end. You're probably going to be quite surprised. It would not be a Value Vinyl with Mark video if I didn't share some new wave. Yes, I got some new wave. Blondie and Parallel Lines. This is from, I think, 78 or 79. This has 3 of their biggest hits. Hanging on the Telephone, One Way or Another, and Heart of Glass, which I think arguably with Rapture are probably 2 of Blondie's biggest hits. But a great album. New Wave is alive and kicking at the Antique Store in Tuckerton. We're going to stay with the 80s New Wave. Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, or OMD for short, and their album Crush. This album still has its Sam Goody sticker on it, as well as the shrink wrap. Had 3 singles released from the album, 2 of which were top 20 hits. It was So In Love, which was their biggest hit from the album, Secret, which was a top 20 hit, and then a 3rd single was released that didn't do too well here in the United States, but did very well across the pond, and that was La Femme Accident. But Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, OMD, and Crush. One of my favorite bands from the 80s, The Pretenders and Get Close. This was an album, if you're a fan of The Pretenders, that they'd really established themselves as a band to be reckoned with, in the albums that preceded this. But this was an album that was produced by Jimmy Iovine, of course, one of the best producers in the history of music. And it actually was done with a lot of the original band members who had been either terminated or left on their own accord So a lot of this album was actually recorded with musicians that they hired on the fly. But it was a very commercially successful album. The big singles from this album were "Him to Her" and what's the "Don't Get Me Wrong," which was a top 10 hit for the band. But I love the Pretenders, and I'm starting to get to the point where I'm getting all of their albums from their catalog, and saw them in concert quite a few times through the years as well. A great band, new wave rock, kind of blends that two different genres of music, but I am a big fan of the Pretenders and glad to add that one to my collection. We're going to step outside of my comfort zone and share B.B. King in London. So, B.B. King, I would probably put in the same category that I put Grateful Dead in. And you may be wondering what I mean by that. And what I mean is that I think everybody should own a B.B. King record. B.B. King is one of the great blues singers of our generation and any generation, to be quite frank. But here's an album that he did in London, and he did so with a strong supporting cast. In fact, many famous composers and musicians played with him, including Ringo Starr. The album was recorded in Abbey Road Studios in London. So just a great album. The album itself is in, I'd say, near mint condition. The record looks like it wasn't even played, the original inner sleeve and everything. There's a pinhole that was probably marked by the record company, so it wasn't going to be returned by the buyer. Other than that, this is a near mint record. The actual songs on the album itself, again, I'm not the biggest B.B. King fan in the world. I could probably name 3 or 4 of his songs, and I'm probably familiar with a few more. This has 2 songs that I was somewhat familiar with, but again, this is not going to be a greatest hits album. There's not like one that's just a huge song. But I think everybody should own a B.B. King album, a Sinatra album, a Dean Martin, and Louis Armstrong. Just everybody should have a B.B. King album, and that's my first. And again, it's not my wheelhouse. 80s is my wheelhouse, but I'm glad to add that to my collection. Going back to the new wave, which is my wheelhouse, we have the B-52s and their self-debut album, the B-52s. What's really cool about this is that this is the first pressing of the album. I am not somebody who buys records and flips them for a profit. When I buy these records, Value Vinyl with Mark, I do so I can add good records to my collection and listen to and collect. I have the whole 12 shelf calyx behind me that's already full. So I do it to buy and to keep. I don't flip records. That's not to say I won't sell any throughout the course of the day or so, but I don't intend to buy them just to flip them for a profit. But what's cool about this one, this is a first pressing, and this has the B-52's logo on the label. And this is a high sought after album. I didn't know that until I did a little research. I add all my records to Discogs. I like to keep track of what I have. It's hard sometimes when you go to a record store or a flea market and you're looking to buy records and you don't remember what you have or what you're looking for. And Discogs has a feature that you can actually add records to a want list. So I will always whip out my want list so I don't have to keep an actual physical list with me. It's on the app. But when I'm doing research to add this in, I'm like, I don't know which one I have. Well, I had the first pressing because I had the one with the B-52's logo on the center. And God, I didn't know, but this is a pretty valuable sought-after record, which is pretty cool. Which is even going to blow your mind even more when I tell you what I paid for all these records. This is a fun album to add to my collection, and that is Billy Idol and his self-titled album, Billy Idol. This is a Canadian pressing. So, again, I buy records at a low cost, a value vinyl record. And having a pressing from another country, for me, is rare because many times you don't find cheaper records from another country that are under $10. That's not to say that I don't have UK pressings or German pressings, or I have one Japan pressing, but I spent, some decent money for those. This is a Canadian pressing. It has the red and white shirt of Billy Idol on the cover, where the US pressing has a black leather jacket. He's wearing a black leather jacket. The two huge songs on this album were White Wedding and Hot in the City. And we're going to end today's video with another album from a band whose catalog I am closing in on completing. And I don't know how many albums I have to go, but we're going to add Allman Brothers' Eat a Peach. This is a 2 LP album that came out, I believe, in 72 or 73. Just an amazing album. One of the sides on this album is a jam. It is a 20-minute jam. Allman Brothers are an amazing band. I really wish that I had gotten into them earlier, because I remember in the 90s and early 2000s that they were on tour in Camden, New Jersey at the waterfront, and I could have seen them in concert, and I never did. And it's one of those things I wish I had gotten into them a lot earlier than I did. And I always liked them, don't get me wrong. I had their Greatest Hits album probably in high school or college, but I just not enough to see them in concert. But now that I'm collecting the vinyl, I will put the Allman Brothers on and just listen straight through, and it just takes me away. It takes me to a fun place. So Eat a Peach has one of my favorite Allman Brothers songs on there called Melissa. But a great album, and of course the side, I think it's side 3, or no, it might be side 4. So the second side of disc 2 is a 23-minute jam. It's just amazing. It's awesome. That's going to do it for today's episode. I thank you very much for watching. But let's go to our dear friend Michael Conrad with a piece of advice.
That's it. Let's roll. Hey.
Let's be careful out there.
That's right. Let's be careful out there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again on Value Vinyl with Mike. Goodbye, everybody.